This is the pattern for the cape that we have decided to use using Burda 2566, but any conventional cape pattern will do as long as it's straight at the front, and you can put a small collar in it, so that's not too important as long as it looks like that. And we will be using the collar pattern that we used for Anna's winter gear costume. This is called a mandarin collar if you need to search for it online. To make the fit, put the cape on, and we just want the front edges to meet when it's finished. So I've put a mark where the finishing point will be, and then just cut a seam allowance all the way around. And it's at this point also that you'll be making a mark where your hem will finish as well.
We're now going to make some bias binding trim to go around the edge of the cape. First of all, we've measured our cape, and we're going to have to make the bias binding in strips.
To cut your fabric on the bias, first of all you need to fold your rectangle piece of fabric and move one end up to the top, so you have a 90-degree angle going down here, and then it'll be a 45-degree angle going up to there. And what you have to do first is to cut along that diagonal from end to end. We have actually bought a set of bias binding tools to be able to make our bias binding with. This one is called a tape maker set, and it comes in 4 different sizes, and the size we're going to use is the one right at the end, which is 25mm. And what you do is to measure around the inside to get your width, and this one is 55mm or 5.5 centimeters. So the next thing we will have to do is cut out some strips. You now need to measure out 4 strips of fabric. Each one will be 55mm wide, and then cut them out. When you have your 4 strips cut, I found it a useful tip to actually cut a point at the end of your strips, because this makes it a lot easier to feed your strips into the tool to start. Okay, having fed the start of the material through the tool, what we're then going to do is you're going to have to put a finger on the tool, and then you gradually pull it through the tool. Then as you go, you're going to be ironing that flat. Now we're going to join our pieces of bias up into one long strip. So with your piece of bias right side to right side, cut them off flat across the top, and then join them like I'm doing here. And then you're going to be sewing a diagonal line from where the crease mark is on this end to the crease mark on that end. You can go all the way through if you like, you don't have to stop. Now that the seam has been sewn, cut off the excess so you're left with a small seam, and then turning it to the right side, re-iron over your joined strips. Working on the inside edge of your cape front, we're now going to sew the bias onto the edge of the cape, and we're going to be using that seam measurement to keep to all the way, and we're only going to go halfway along the bottom because I'm not really sure at this point how long the bias is supposed to be. This is the centre back of the cape on the hem, and what I've done is just roughly pinned my bias starting from the other end now, coming this way, so that when it reaches the centre back here, what we will then do is cut that off and then rejoin it, and then I can continue sewing all the way around. I've done it this way so that all my bias seams where they are joined together are even on both sides of the cape.
Next, sew your bias binding onto the inside edge. You can see here, this is the inside of the cloak. Sew it so you can just see some of the edge of the cloak peeking out, and start sewing on the crease. And sew all the way around till you get to the other side. Okay, now take the outside of your garment, the seam facing out, and press the seam inwards this direction. Just take your iron, and then you just iron it all facing this direction, all the way around your cloak. Okay, next what you want to do is, while you had your seam flat, is to run another sewing stitch, just 2mm. Just show you this side, it might be a bit better. Just 2mm from that edge. Remember earlier you sewed on the crease line? You want to just go 2mm to the right towards the outside. And that will allow it to bend a bit easier when you come to iron it again for another press. Like so. Next you want to start pinning your bias onto the outside of your garments. Make sure that your edge is folded in where you ironed it earlier. It should be nice and crisp. Now that you've sewn that other line, it's helped force the liner under by a few millimeters. I recommend putting the pins in at an angle like this as you go around, making sure that your fabric is flat. It'll probably take you about an hour to do, but it's an important step to make sure that it's kept flat all the way around your edge of your cape.
When we were designing the pattern for the inner blue petals, we just used some scrap brown felt to get an idea of what it's going to look like, and cut out the shapes as near as we could, and then while Tracy was wearing the cape they were pinned on, so we got a better idea of how they're going to sit once they're on the cape. We're more or less happy with the patterns that we've got. Some of them need to be altered slightly to give them a longer point, but I think we're happy with that. What we're going to do is we're going to do it in sections, so we'll cut the first section of 3 like so out of one piece of felt, and then the 3 sections at the back, and then the last 3 sections on the other side. Using double-sided adhesive paper, stick your green shapes down first onto the paper, and then you peel off the paper at the back, and then you'll be able to stick it down onto your work, and then do the front 2 pieces as well. This is very awkward to do because you've actually got to do it while it's being worn, so you can go around the shoulder I think if you try and just put it on flat, then you won't get your shape, and then it won't, I don't think it would look the same. So after I've stuck that on, what I've then done is gone around the edge with a line of sewing just to make sure that it doesn't come off. For the blue shapes, I've just cut these out and pinned them on, and these are going to be sewn all the way around, hold them in place. Next you can put your mandarin collar together, and you'll have one layer of stiffener, then a piece of green liner, and then a piece of blue felt, and then after you've sewn around, cut off any excess material. Next you need to sew the collar on, so pin it to the edge of the cape so that you've got the blue felt pointing outwards. On the inside of the collar you're going to be turning a seam under, and then you're going to be hand sewing it to the inside of the cape. Now that the collar's in, what you need to do is sew on a large hook and eye at the top to hold your cape together.
Okay, I'm now going to make the bow for the cape. So I've cut out this template 7 inches long and 4 inches wide. I'm using this slightly turquoisey greeny coloured cotton, and I've cut 2 of these, and I've just overlocked the edges because I just want it to look neat. I've also cut out a piece of net the same size. Next you want to lay one piece of green cotton over the other, like so. Then you want to take your piece of net and just lay that over the top. Like so. Okay, next you want to sew a centimetre around your edges, but you want to leave about a 2-inch gap in the middle. So just get your centre point and measure 1 inch each side, and that should come to your 2 inches. Do not sew at this part here. Okay, next turn the whole thing inside out using the hole and give it a press with the iron. Okay, next we're going to close up this gap with a little bit of hand sewing. Okay, after you've hand sewn that hole together, just run a simple machine gathering stitch down the dead centre of your rectangle, leaving 2 tails at the end to pull your gathering stitches. Okay, you just want to sew a couple of snap fasteners on to your cloak, making sure they're the right way up. And here I've just sewn a couple onto the back of the bow, and then you can just pop it onto your cloak like so. Once you've put your poppers on your bow, just attach it and it should look like this.